Hello, hello, and happy Wednesday. When it came time to decide what I would create for this week's video, I'll be very honest, I was at a loss. So when I'm at a loss and not feeling overly inspired, I often find that it's helpful for me to release the pressure I'm putting on myself, because oftentimes if I'm having a hard time finding inspiration, it's because I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself. So first things first, release the pressure and focus on doing something else. And one of the things that helps me reconnect and ground usually is just going outside for a walk in nature. And so that's what I did. I closed my studio door and I went outside, and I decided I was just going to walk the yard. If anything in particular sparked an interest in me, I would take a picture of it. But my idea was just to really try to be as present as possible while I was walking in the yard and just to observe what I was seeing around me. And when I do this, I often, do some deadheading in my flowers, and I check my garden, and something interesting usually comes up. And this week is no different. A little frog jumped in front of me when I was getting ready to do some deadheading in one of my flower beds. And so he was so cute. And I took out my phone and I took some pictures of him. I mean, he's what they call a northern leopard frog. And he is mostly brown and with black leopard spots, but also had this little stripe of iridescent green on his back. I took some pictures. The pictures, unfortunately, don't do him justice, but he was so cute, and he became the inspiration for this week's painting. So no, I'm not painting a frog, but he got me thinking of fairy tales. And fairy tales were something I used to love reading when I was a kid. I love the Les Contes de Grimm. I think they're called the Grimm fairy tales. Anyway, I just loved those stories. I love the idea of fairies and creatures in a forest, just everything that comes with fairy tales, I guess. All the imagination that comes into writing these stories. I always find them fascinating. And so the little frog inspired me to create a painting that was sort of like my little escape into a fairy land. There won't be any fairies in my painting, but it is going to be in landscape with fairy tale inspired colors. I really love how the painting turned out, but it was a bit of a struggle getting it started. Maybe at some point I'll paint a little frog in a landscape sometime, because he really helped me get out of that little funky mood I was in so that I could find that little spark of inspiration again. Without any further ado, I'm gonna move on to the video. Yeah, I hope you'll either feel like joining me in painting, or if you just want to relax with me like I say every week. I get it. I watch art videos to relax as well. And if you feel like doing that with me, I would love to have you along. So let's get going. Eventually, I know I'm going to want to work with some pinks and purples, but for now, just to get things going and to make the paper a little bit less intimidating, I'm going to start with a color that I'm very comfortable with, and that is blue. And I'm going to add a layer of blue on the entire piece of paper, but what I'll do is I'll make a little bit of a gradient with it. So it'll be darker on top, going lighter into the center, and then darker again in the bottom. And hopefully you'll be able to see how I'm doing this. It's very simple. I'm working with my biggest brush because my paper is 8 by 12, so it's a fairly big piece of paper. Once I've added the color on both the top and the bottom, I'm coming in with a relatively clean brush and I'm working water up to join the area of blue at the top. And then I'm going to do the same thing heading to the bottom of the piece of paper. And when the water touches the color that's on the bottom, it's going to help to spread that color up. But I do really want to make sure that both the top and bottom parts of my painting are a bit darker, so I'll add a little bit more color and I'll continue to work on creating that gradient. Once I'm done with my gradient of blue, I pull out my not so secret magic ingredient, and that is fine grained table salt, and I sprinkle it all over my piece of paper. I find that this helps to get the process really going for me, and it provides a lot of inspiration for what will come next. Once my background is dry, of course, I remove all the salt on the paper before I continue to paint. I do find that the marks the salt creates are so beautiful, and it often is how I work through the intimidation of um, a blank piece of paper. Seeing those marks helps me figure out what I'm going to do next. And in this case, I've decided I'm going to create some mountains in a background, but I want them to be over a lake so you can see the reflection of the mountains into the lake. So it's going to be slightly different than what I normally do. And I'm going to be working with colors that I love, but that are colors I don't work with very frequently. I do find pinks and purples really beautiful. But purple in particular, for me, can be a bit of a hard color to work with. And I want to incorporate it in the painting to create this little whimsical fairy tale landscape, but I'm not 100% sure how to go about it. So I'm starting with pink because I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable with that color, and this opera pink is a color that I really, really love. I'm keeping it fairly light just to start off because I want to preserve some of those marks that the salt left in the blue paint. And as I go along, I'm going to work on building my layers. Since my mountains are going to be on the other side of a lake, I want to put in some color underneath my mountains so that it looks like my mountains are reflecting on the water on the lake. I'm not going to be overly concerned about exactly recreating what's on top. I'm going to do my best to create something similar to what's on top, but I'm not going to stress about it because it's not going to be as focused as the mountains in the backdrop. It's just they're going to be hopefully in the end. This is the hope. I've never done this before, so we'll see. They're going to be somewhat like a little bit of a reflection that's somewhat blurred by the water. And that is the look that I am going for. We will see if I can achieve it.
I'm trying it for the first time, and because I'm trying it for the first time, I'm also doing my best to release the pressure of expectation. That usually is the first thing that will take the fun out of the painting process for me. And I do not, even though I'm hoping to create a landscape that's going to look a certain way, I do not want to put the pressure on myself to create something very specific. I want the process to be very intuitive and to be guided by what comes as I continue creating. So no pressure, just adding some color and seeing what I can do. And at this point, it's kind of a so far so good kind of feeling. At first, these little purple areas that I created in the foreground were going to be just like little rocks sort of near the shoreline that were standing in water. And when I looked at it again, I just really wasn't feeling it. So I decided that I would just join that whole area and create something slightly different. I might still go with rocks, but for now, I want to change that area up a little bit. I don't want to darken the water too much because it is sort of going to be reflecting the sky above, and right now the sky is pretty light, but I am also going to darken my sky as I go along, so we'll see how things change. It's really tough sometimes when you're in this part of the process where you're just starting to build up your idea and it's not looking anywhere close to what you hope it's going to look like when you're done. Sometimes it can be daunting, if not scary, and a bit of a challenge not to give up because it just feels messy at first. And it is like that in a lot of my painting processes, if not all of them. But this process in particular, I'm finding a bit challenging because I want to, like I said, I've never created water reflecting, or at least not specifically um, a landscape reflecting on water. And so I'm not 100% sure how that's going to go. And I'm feeling a bit daunted. So I'm just trying to trust that I will figure it out as I go along. And the important thing is that I keep the process flowing, because if I start to worry and put too much thought into my process, and that's when I run the risk of wanting to stop. And then when you stop, you get sort of caught in what I call, or what many call, analysis paralysis. And then you get paralyzed into not doing anything or just leaving the painting completely to the side and trying to start something else. I do not want to do that with this process. For one, I have a video I want to post, and if I don't continue pushing forward, it's going to be a lot more challenging for me to do that, and maybe more challenging for me to come up with a new idea. So I am going to keep plugging along, and we'll see as it goes. I do like how the colors sort of blend together, the purples, the pinks, and the blues. They're very pretty. But like I said, initially it can look very messy, and so it's important to not get stuck on that messiness and focus on just continuing to move forward by doing the things that feel like little intuitive nudges that your intuition is saying, why don't you try this? Because for me, usually when my intuition says try this or try that, it's usually a nudge in the right direction. So I do my very best to pay attention to these nudges. And already I'm starting to like the fact that I'm darkening the sky. It's starting to look a little bit more like the lake below. And I think it's all going to come together eventually. At this point of my painting process, I am really focusing on intensifying my colors and defining my shapes. I want there to be good value contrast in my painting, and so intensifying the colors will help with that. And defining the shapes will also help with that as well. Having contrast in a painting is important, and I mention this a lot. It's the thing I think that helps to really create interest in your painting. So if all the colors were of the same value and all of the shapes were the same, for me in particular, I don't think it would be nearly as interesting. I love the beautiful marks that the salt leaves in my paint when I add it, but it also seems to really subdue everything and everything becomes more in the same value. And so now it's really important for me to come in, add some more color, define my shapes. And as I'm doing this, I'm also starting to feel those little intuitive nudges that are going to lead me into my next step. Since I want the mountains reflecting on the water to be slightly less defined than the mountains in the landscape in the distance, I'm coming in with a clean wet brush and I'm gently rubbing my brush over the areas where I painted these mountains reflecting in the water. And that's just going to help to sort of um, tone them down a little bit and make them less defined so that they don't look like there's mountains growing under mountains. And hopefully in the end it'll look like it's a reflection on the water. But again, never done this before, so I will not know how to do it if I never try to do it. And I won't know how it'll turn out until I've actually done it. So I'm just choosing to trust that I am going to figure it out. I love my color scheme, but my intuition is telling me that I need to add a little bit more whimsy and warmth into the painting, and so I've decided to add a very light wash of this pyrrole red, pyrrole red, pyrrole red. We've had this discussion before. I never really know how to pronounce it because I've heard it pronounced many, many different ways. And I don't know that there is any right or wrong way to pronounce it. It really depends on your preference, I think. But I'm also not an Anglophone. I'm a Francophone, so it's quite possible that there is a correct way to pronounce it, and I just don't get it. But I've heard many different Anglophones pronounce it different ways. So it's Pyrrole, red. One of my favorite reds. I've used it in other paintings and I always find it really beautiful. But if I went in with this color a little bit too intensely, it would probably overtake the whole painting. And that's not really what I want to do. I want to have hints of the color in my painting because I think it'll look very pretty, especially in the sky. And since the sky is reflecting onto the water, I'll also add it in the water area of my painting as well. When I'm at a point in my painting process where I'm not too sure what else I could do with paint in order to add interest to my painting, I usually start to pull out my pens, and this helps me to define areas, to add some more dark value contrast, and it is something that I enjoy doing quite a bit, so it's very zen and relaxing for me to do that. And since it's something I enjoy doing, usually the ideas just keep flowing very, very easily to me. This Indian Orange, which is an iridescent paint by CSY Art Gallery, is a color that sort of is reminiscent to me of that pyrrole or pearly red that I added in a light wash in the background of my painting. I toyed with the idea of maybe having it be the color of my sun, and then I decided against that, and instead I'm trying again something I've never done before, but want to try and see how it goes. I'm going to add it sort of to go around the sun, sort of radiating away from the sun. And so I'm adding some clear water around my sun ahead of time. And then I'm going to come in and drop some of that color around the sun as well. And I think it's going to help to really um, pull out some of that color that's in a very light wash in the background. And it's also going to make the sun just slightly more visually interesting. And I think it's just going to be beautiful because it is a beautiful color and I haven't used it in a while. So we shall see. Right now I'm keeping it pretty light, and maybe I'll add some more of it a little bit later. But whatever I add here, I will also add to the water below. Now it's time for me to add some gold. And I know this is really going to make the painting come even more alive because gold against that purple, ah, it is just gorgeous. Gold and purple are complementary colors and they go so beautifully together that I knew it was just going to be perfect for this painting. That's why ultimately I could not choose the Indian orange for the sun. I think it would have been pretty, but it was not going to have that same wow effect for me that the gold has against the purple. And I'm feeling like this was definitely the way to go. So I'm adding the gold, and again, whatever I do here, I have to put a little bit of that in the water as well because the water will be reflecting the sky above it. So I'm not going to add it in the same way as I'm adding the gold up top. I think it's supposed to be more defined, more pronounced, so because it is more visible in the sky and the water is a little bit blurry, but it is important to add some of that gold in the water as well, and I will do that shortly. I'm now going to start tracing some gold over the pencil lines that I created for my rays of light, of sunlight. And as I'm looking at this area, I'm kind of feeling like I want to add a little bit more of that Indian orange. And yeah, I think I definitely need to do it. I'll like it better because there is some of that and it looks fairly pretty, but I think I need a little bit more because the sun is sort of overtaking that color and you don't see a whole lot of it. It looks okay, but I think a little bit more of it would probably look even nicer. So I'm gonna add that and then I'll keep adding my layers of, or my sun rays. So I added a little bit more of that Indian orange around my sun using the very same technique that I used before, where I added some water first and then dropped in some color. And I do like having more of that in the painting. I think it really helps to define the sun even more. And so now I'm feeling better about adding my rays of sunshine emanating from the sun. And yeah, I think this painting is heading in a good direction. Gold can be pretty overpowering, so when I'm adding it to the water, I am also being careful to add little blotches of that color, and then I'm using a wet brush to spread the color. If I just went in with pure color, I would completely cover everything that's already there, and that's not the whole point of what I'm trying to do. I just want to create glimmers of that gold in the water and still keep some of the reflections from the mountains up top um, in the water as well. So again, lots and lots of water here and just a tiny bit of that gold. It will go a long way. I'm liking how the gold and the Indian orange from the sun are looking, but everything again in this area looks very much in the same value. The gold stands out just a slight amount, but I'm deciding that I need to define my sun a little bit more, and so I pulled out my stippling pen, my dotting pen, and I'm going to add a little bit of black stippling along the edge of my sun, and I think this will help in terms of value contrast to make the sunshine stand out even more. To me, that stippling around the sun was definitely worth doing because it does make the sun stand out more. And now I need to focus on creating a little bit more balance in my painting. And so I'm going to add some gold to the bottom of the painting as well, because I've got that beautiful sunshine with the beautiful rays of sunlight emanating from the sun, filling the top of my painting, but the bottom looks a little bit bare. There's a little bit of that gold in the water, but I think I need to add some of that gold in my little rocks just to make the bottom half of my painting more interesting and balanced. I like my painting quite a bit at this point, and I could almost say that it is great just as it is, but really I was feeling like something was missing and I was hesitating to add anything else, but I really think adding a plant of some kind, a little whimsical plant, will help to create more perspective, push the foreground forward and the background backwards, and just, yeah, I think it needed something. Because that area where the water is, it's beautiful with those little streaks of gold in the water, but it's still pretty plain, and I wanted to make it more interesting. And I think once I start adding some more black into those little makeshift leaves from my whimsical plant, I think it's gonna just pull everything together. Sometimes it's hard to make a decision like this one because in order for me to create something like this in the foreground and make it look closer to the viewer, I needed to also cover part of what I really liked in the background in my mountains. And I really love how my mountains had turned out. And so I was hesitating to add anything to cover any part of the mountains up. But ultimately, as I'm adding this, I really feel like it was the right decision because it just makes the painting way more interesting. There was something missing without this little plant in here, and I think after adding this, I'll be ready to call my painting finished. This is a good example of a painting I wish I could show you in person because it just does not deceive. It doesn't seem to do it justice to show it on camera. It is really pretty how that gold catches the light, but the gold in the water in particular, oh yeah, I'm really liking how that effect worked out. And I don't know that it is completely a successful, painting of mountains reflecting into a lake. But I feel like the feeling is there, and I love how I was able to create the effect of maybe that there's water there. And I think adding that little whimsical plant in the end was the perfect final touch because it helped to bring everything together. And yeah, I am really, really happy with how it turned out, and I hope you really enjoyed watching this video as well. This was one of my longest videos in quite some time, and so if you have had the fortitude to be here with me till the very end, I want to say a huge thank you. I did my best to edit as much of it as possible, but I did want to include the parts that I felt would help you create your own. So again, a great big thank you for joining me on my creative journey. I hope you have a wonderful week, my sweet friends, and never forget, happy creating!